Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is brought to you by the Small Business Development Center of the state of New Jersey. This is your NJ Thrive Small Business Webinar Series. We provide weekly webinars to help New Jersey small businesses grow, start, and thrive their businesses. My name is Marjorie Salas. I am your host today. Please know that this is part of our tech team. We are America's New Jersey Small Business Development Centers Network Tech Team, an NJSBDC exclusive technology commercialization team providing technical support and guidance to eligible investors for SBIR and STTR grants to fund the R&D towards commercialization of tech innovators. Number one, we provide no cost pitch to proposal consulting. Number two, we provide training and events starting at zero cost. And number three, we provide exclusive small business tech resources. Please see our map for a location near you. Please know that today's agenda, we have multiple headlines. I have them here. This is a short read on NJEDA. They have a $3.6 million award towards a pilot clean tech demonstration grant program. Let me go back. Also, we have Biden-Harris administration introducing entrepreneurship and training courses for military spouses. You can take advantage of this. And we have one more. We have Governor Murphy announces an additional $20 million in funding for New Jersey manufacturing voucher. It's sending me to this link. Please, things to keep in mind. Type all your Q&A, all your questions in the Q&A box. So our speakers, it's able to answer all your questions. And we highly ask you to complete a 3-minute survey that we will send you the additional resources that the speaker will be sharing. So if you submit the 3-minute survey, we will reply back to you with all the resources your speaker will be sharing. So today is the 7th series, Advanced Techniques in SBIR/STTR Market Research and Consumer Discovery. Today we have Cheryl Vickroy. She's an NJSBDC Tech Team Consultant, and she is right here with us today. So are you guys ready to start the webinar? We have 29 participants. Welcome everyone. And Sherry will be sharing her screen now.
Thank you, everyone. Let me pull my PowerPoint presentation for you so we can get started. And I believe that you can see my screen at this point. It's great to be here again with you. I've been doing this for several months now, and so I might cut short a little bit of the introductory material today because we have a good amount of things to cover. Those of you who have seen me before know that I have a business background, and I consider myself also a professor of practice because not only do I work as a consultant, but I also teach and have had various other roles in my past career, including investing in early stage technologies and serving as a mentor in the National Science Foundation I-Corps, as well as an SBIR STTR reviewer. Today's agenda is focused mainly on the business side of your business. I keep rotating the presentation so that we focus first on the technical aspects, and then the next session we focus a little bit more on the business aspects. So today will be more about the business. I'll do a brief review of SBIR STTR programs overall, talk about the goals of commercialization as that differs in phase and by agency, and then we'll dive right into different types of market research and talk about some more advanced topics on how you can figure out whether the market that you want to attract is large enough and has a wonderful fit with the product that you propose. So what is SBIR STTR? Today, we're going to focus on the S in SBIR STTR, and that stands for small business. So many of these things you have seen in my earlier presentations. There are certain eligibility criteria that you must meet. I'd be happy to go over those with you in person if you would like a review of that. In this case, what I'm going to talk about applies to both the SBIR side, where the business is applying on their own mainly, and also the STTR side, where you may have an academic or a federal lab as your partner. There are many reasons to pursue SBIR STTR funding. The main one is that you have a passion about developing new products and services for commercial scale. So not only do you perhaps enjoy inventing things to real world problems, but you want to launch them using the mechanism of a small business. In any case, no matter where you start, the process is worth it for the planning that we or you do together, and also the people and the partners that you meet along the way. I've highlighted, using my yellow highlighter here, certain things in each of the different phases of technical development that pertain to the business development that goes alongside the technical development. So in phase one, which is essentially feasibility for the technology, we also take a look at and try to identify preliminarily the market need or the opportunity. In phase two, which is the stage for prototyping and optimization on the technical side, we create a full-blown commercialization plan, or a forward-looking plan to figure out how you might launch your technologies into the commercial market. And then phase three is actually where we focus completely on commercialization, often looking for additional or different sources of funding beyond SBIR STTR. Now, I talked, I think 2 sessions ago, about the difference between technology push and market pull. So historically, technology has been sort of pushed out, invented in a lab or in a research facility, but without much regard to what are the needs of actual buying customers, what are the needs of the market. And so often it can end up to be a mismatch with the actual commercialization aspects. It can often be feature heavy. Oftentimes we call it technology push because the inventor of the technology feels sort of like they're pushing this out to the market, and it's more costly. We've learned over time it's much more costly to develop in the absence of information about the needs of buyers. Nowadays, we try to establish something which is called market pull, which takes a look at what are the problems that the buyers are trying to solve. We also try to understand what is the importance or the urgency of those problems. In other words, is this a vitamin pill, like something that a buyer might take just as a general way to increase their health? Or is this an actual painkiller? They have a serious problem that really needs a solution. Or in fact, is it a game changer which can open new market alternatives? or new market opportunities. As compared to current alternatives, we need to understand deeply from the side of the entrepreneur, why is your solution so compelling, it will literally make people and industries want to change. This slide is very complicated, and I'm not going to go into it in depth other than to mention that as we develop an emerging technology in what we would call maybe a science-based business, we have to pay attention to 3 different tracks: the technical milestones, the business milestones, and the funding milestones. This would be a really good slide to come back to and look at after the presentation and see if you can identify where your business is in this schema. Are you quite far along in the technical milestones, but you haven't really matured your business? Is the opposite true? Do you have a good understanding of your business, but the technology still needs to be further developed? That's why we go back and forth in the different presentations, working at one point on advancing the technology and working at another point on advancing the business, so as to qualify for certain types of funding that apply. This was also a slide from a previous presentation. Essentially, we need to know, do you have a compelling story? And part of that is the story of your business as well as the story of your technology. There's an important problem that needs to be solved, and you are the one to solve it for individuals or for society. We acknowledge that current solutions are inadequate and want to know, how is your approach better? How is your approach innovative? How is it different from state of the art right now? And lastly, of course, is there a viable commercial opportunity with buyers who will pay money for what it is that you want to sell them, provide to them? In other words, why will you and your team win the race of this business opportunity? A time or two ago, I also talked about proposal requirements, and I chose 2 agencies to highlight that have a very clear emphasis on the commercial aspects of your work, as well as on the technical aspects. This can happen as early as phase 1. So in phase 1, we need to start developing the roadmap for what it's going to look like as you develop your business. How do we do that? Well, we do that using market research. For those of you who don't have a business background, I'm going to introduce some terminology here, and the terminology might seem a little bit backwards, so let me explain why it's called what it is. There are 2 main types of market research that you may be doing. One is called secondary market research, and one is called primary market research. Typically, in an emerging technology, we access secondary market research first, which is why it can be a little bit confusing. The definition of secondary research, and the reason why it's called secondary, is because it's research done by others, not by yourself, by others. Often it's done by professionals, and it's available in the form of market research reports, some of which might be available for no cost other than the time that you have to take to search it out. A downside, though, of secondary market research is that it may not fit exactly what you're looking for, especially with regard to emerging technologies. There's a reason for that, and it is that market research firms want to sell their market research reports. And if there's an emerging technology, which is probably newly developing into what's initially going to be a very small market, they might not be able to sell enough of that data to make it worth their while. So we introduce another aspect, which is primary market research, or research that you do yourself. You often might do this after trying to access the secondary market research and get a baseline for how big you think your market is. What are the upsides and downsides of primary market research? Well, first of all, you have to learn how to do it if you don't know, and we're going to talk about that today. Also, if you don't know sufficiently how to do it, you might do it incorrectly, which could lead you in the wrong direction. It too takes time and effort, but I can assure you, having done this over and over again for the past 20 or so years, it is absolutely invaluable in terms of both learning where your opportunity is for your business and also making contacts that can help your business grow. So let's talk a little bit about an approach that's taken the nation by storm. This is coming from a realm known as lean startup. And essentially, we use some new acronyms here: TAM, SAM, and SOM. This is in the realm of initially sizing your market. And I pulled a graphic here off the internet that explains at a high level the difference between TAM, SAM, and SOM. And then I inserted a little bit of my own text based on my experience with emerging technologies, because this can be different than that of existing technologies. So first of all, we'd like to know the total addressable market. How big is the largest possible but still applicable market? Now, I'll mention a word of caution about this here. When I'm working with clients and students, I often find that they define the total addressable market. They're trying to look for the biggest possible market, and in doing so, they can easily define it incorrectly. For example, you have to be careful about the product that it is that you are introducing. If you are introducing a therapeutic, for example, and you tell me that your total addressable market includes all of the disease, including diagnostics as well, I'm going to say to you, no, you're doing therapeutics. I don't think diagnostics are ever going to be a part of your total addressable market. Okay, so we want to be careful that you don't try to artificially inflate and come up with a market that you think of as your total addressable market that's actually not even your market at all. It's fine to have a total addressable market that is smaller. The key is that it has to be applicable to whatever it is that you're creating. So from that, we then ask, what portion of that market is interested in your specific solution? Say, for example, again, that the example of the therapeutics. If you're taking a kind of a therapeutic that includes injectables, oral medications, and every other thing you can think of, that, and you have an injectable, we could argue that not everyone in the total addressable market is going to want to use your style of means of delivery, let's say, for example. And so we have to reduce the TAM by some proportion in order to come at what we call the serviceable available market. What market can you actually serve that is interested in your solution? And then lastly, what portion of that can you actually obtain? It's a mistake to think that you can obtain 100% of the serviceable available market. Why? Well, because if you have an emerging technology, you're generally a very small firm. You're an early stage firm. You just don't have the resources to ever attract 100% of the market, even if you're first to market. So it's some proportion that's more typical that you might be able to obtain, especially in the early years. This may not exceed 10%, for example. Why do we care about these numbers being precise? Well, we care because eventually you'll want to try to figure out a value for your company, and the value is going to be based on the market that you can service and obtain not the total addressable market, at least in the near term. When doing market research, we also care about drivers and trends. These are big picture things that are happening in the external environment, the macro environment, and are driving or pushing against the idea that you have. These things can be coming from things like economic trends, social trends, environmental trends, even politics and legislation, as well as regulatory initiatives. We want to look at these things briefly and figure out whether they're helping you to launch your technology or whether they're working against you. If you have several of these trends that seem to be helping you, then the likelihood that you'll be able to launch a successful business is greater than if you have several of these things that are working against you. Lastly, we also want to know, what is the growth trend? Are you launching into a market that's growing very quickly? Or are you launching into a market that's kind of mature and is growing very slowly? This is known as the compound annual growth rate, and abbreviated as CAGR, and this is available for your industry via this secondary market research. This is often fairly easy to find a proxy for whatever it is that you're trying to develop. I mentioned a couple of slides ago about a term known as lean startup. Lean startup was coined as a definition fairly recently ago, and it was used to describe these new approaches to starting businesses. It pretty much rejects the notion of a traditional business plan that's written and originated only by the mind of the inventor. And it insists upon the need to reduce market risk by identifying potential buyers as early as possible. So instead of just thinking about how you view the problem and whether or not you think the market will adapt or adopt to your technology, it literally asks you to go out and speak with buyers as early as possible and try to find what their needs are very specifically. This all helps us to identify attributes of the solution that the buyer needs. And from that, one determines the business model. We won't talk about the business model too much today, but that's where we're leading. How do we do this? Well, we do this via something known as customer discovery. Discovering customers is essentially doing market research. It's doing primary market research. So you do this on your own to some degree, either large or small. And we acknowledge the idea that customers will include, if we define it very broadly, we acknowledge that customers will include not only buyers, but also influencers, other stakeholders, and even those who will try to sabotage your work, competitors, essentially. Additionally, you want to know the characteristics of your market. Is it large and consolidated? Is it a mass market such as big pharma with very few buyers? Or is it a smaller market that's very fragmented? Say, for example, academic researchers. They're scattered all over the country and they make independent buying decisions. So we want to think about the characteristics of the market and who those individual buyers are. Well, where and how do we begin? Normally, we begin by brainstorming who those buying customers might be. And so you can ask yourself or your team some questions about who might purchase the value that you're creating. And then ask yourselves, is that an end user or is that some kind of intermediary or an influencer? Either thing can be true depending upon the nature of your technology. Eventually, we want to understand who among your customers are the most influential. Do you have, if you have a therapeutic or a diagnostic, for example, do we need to worry about intermediaries such as Centers for Medicaid and Medicare in pharma, therapeutics, diagnostics, et cetera. Also regulatory agencies. We could argue that they might be a type of customer, even though they're not going to buy your technology, they will heavily influence whether or not you can do what it is that you have in mind to do. So we ask, what other stakeholders must be considered, and how will these different and very distinct segments benefit in different and distinct ways? Ultimately, we're going to place the most emphasis on the buyer, but we want to understand the needs that every one of these different parties has in order to have a full picture of how you might launch your technology. Customers always want to know what's in it for them. They don't want to be pushed to buy something that they may or may not need. They're more interested in engaging with you if you ask them about their opinions. So we want to discover through dialogue with them, what are the benefits that they would like? What are the pains or problems that they need to be alleviated? What are the needs or desires that they have? And by understanding this very well, we can finally come to a deep understanding of the competitive advantages of your particular product or service. I think of these also in the same way as technology push versus market pull. I think of these as thinking about features versus benefits. If I'm thinking about features, I'm thinking about things like sensitivity, specificity, quickness, binding properties, all sorts of things. But if I'm thinking about benefits, I'm actually thinking about how would the customer think about these things? Does it make their the use of the product easier? Is there a reduced cost? Is there a greater effectiveness in some way? Will we be able to save more lives or do good for society by certain things? So I think about the differences there, and I'm always focusing on understanding the benefits side. Why? So that I can figure out what value is actually being provided. What value will be delivered to the buying customer? What problem is being solved? And asking ourselves as well, what is the whole product? Does your solution deliver the entire product, or does it deliver something that needs to be bundled with many other things, such as assays needing to be bundled with reagents or kits? And how does your solution require something to be added in order to meet end user requirements? So all of these things come together in terms of figuring out the value with respect to things like sensitivity, specificity, cost, efficiency, and of course, user friendliness. I'm using a lot of these terms over and over again, but I'm using them in that way so that you become familiar with how business people would talk about these things. Well, we started with brainstorming who your customers might be, but then tips on getting started for doing actual customer discovery. If you want to just dip your toe in the water and interview a few people, the next thing we would do is identify the questions that you want to ask them or the hypotheses that you have. In this case, we call back to something known as design theory, and we want to, as we talk and have dialogue with our customers, we want to ask why 5 times. Well, you might wonder, why in the world would we do that? Well, the first why that you ask about why is something wrong, why are they having a problem, et cetera, will get to the surface issues. But if we continue to ask, why is that happening? And then as we uncover with the next question, why is that? Can you say more about why that is, et cetera? We eventually come to what's known as a root cause. And root causes are much more powerful than surface problems. So we're learning about the problems that buyers encounter. And again, if we're going to start doing this outreach and doing primary market research, we don't want to even mention our solution. Why? Because we don't want to influence their thinking, the paradigm that they have about the problem. We don't want to influence that with our solution at this point. We just want to cast a very, very wide net and understand as best we can how people describe the problems that they have. Often we'll start with a very basic question. What is the most challenging problem you have with X? X being the entire realm in which your technology exists. Then we ask these follow-on questions. Why is that? Why is that? Can you tell me more about why this is? When we look at this in a presentation on paper, it sounds very stilted. Like, how can you just go asking people why? Well, it doesn't happen that way or unfold that way in the real world because you're engaging in a dialogue. Once you ask people about their problems, they start talking and they talk more and they say something else. So they'll lead you with their talking to what they really think is the biggest problem. And you become more like a detective or an interviewer, periodically interjecting, and why is that? And that will get them to talk more. And why is that? And that will get them to talk more. Essentially, you're looking for as much information as they're willing to share with you, and then you collect that data, and I'll talk in a couple of slides about what you'll do with it after you collect it. Trust me, this method works, and I've done it over and over again. It's amazing sometimes the things that you can learn just by engaging in a dialogue in which you listen rather than present most of the information. Other tips for reaching out. Well, it's best if you can begin with whom you know and sort of warm up, because this practice of listening, engaging in dialogue, not pushing your technology, it's going to take some time before you feel comfortable with it. Often I start with people that I know very well. I start with relatives. I start with colleagues. Anyone I can think of who's close to the subject matter, but maybe not what I would consider a high stakes contact. So I start with the people that I know, and I work towards people that I don't know by, in every engagement, asking the person that I'm speaking with for 2 or 3 additional contacts who might know about, the realm in which I'm doing this discovery. I also ask those folks if I can use their name in making a connection. This makes making your second and third and fourth connections so much easier to make. Because if you don't know someone, you can say, oh, I talked to so-and-so, your colleague or your friend or your relative, and they gave me your name thinking that you might be able to help me as well. You always want to cast these folks in the light of they are helping you. You are never selling them something. They are helping you to better understand the realm of their problems. You can certainly use LinkedIn or folks in your own network to help identify those that you'd eventually most like to speak with. But don't start with your high stakes contacts. Instead, start by making a list and sending out invitations to talk. Make sure you mention that you are not selling anything. You just want their opinion about the problems that they have. I find this works so well because people like to engage in dialogue and tell me what they would like to have changed about their products, their world, the work they do, and so on and so forth. Sometimes when we're doing this in a much more advanced way, we can use surveys, but surveys are never best as a starting point. Why? Because they contain far too much of your paradigm. And if you don't word the questions exactly right, you can easily bias the outcomes. So surveys are not great, emails are not great. Yes, this takes a little bit of time, but if you do it well, you'll end up with contacts who will eventually want to become your customers. Again, reassure the person at the start. You are not selling them anything. You only want their opinions. I'm very clear when I do my outreach about telling people I only need 5 or 10 minutes of their time. And I'm honest about that. Once I reach 5 or 10 minutes, whatever I've asked for from them, I pause and I say, oh, we're at 5 minutes. I've used, you know, I've I've taken the 10 minutes we have so far, and more often than not, the person on the other end of the line or on the other end of the webinar will say they'll want to keep going. That way, I'm not pushing them to do something they don't want to. They're actually saying, oh, I have more to tell you. Only keep going if they're willing to carry on. If you can, have two people doing this, one asking the questions and one taking the notes, especially at the start, because it's sometimes very hard to manage both asking the questions and also taking the notes yourself unless you've practiced this technique a bit. I also always send a little thank you note just by email. Thank you for your time. Your expertise was invaluable. Because again, you're making relationships more than anything else. You're making valuable future contacts. And if you treat these people with respect and care, they may eventually become your customers. What do we do with all the data we gather? Well, I often say in the classroom, and this seems to resonate with people who are scientists, there are a couple of stages of thinking about data. One is the analysis, and one is the synthesis. The analysis is what we're doing when we're gathering all this data. We're doing the outreach, we start with hypotheses, we talk with people, we gather data, but without objectively thinking about it until we have enough data that it makes sense to look for patterns. So we're analyzing the problem at that stage, we're breaking it up into small elements, and we're just setting that aside. However, there is a follow-on step known as synthesis. Synthesis is when we actually begin to look for patterns in the data that we've gathered, and it resolves the conflict between the hypotheses that we've created and the validation, or how many people have said this is a problem, the validation of what our hypotheses about the problem were in order to come to conclusions. Essentially, we're doing this analysis step and the synthesis step across our entire business. This is especially true if we have several potential markets. Say, for example, we have a platform technology and there are several markets. We want to search first very broadly to understand the lay of the landscape, and then say, or try to identify, what we can say no to immediately. We might say no because there's no valid problem there. We might say no because using secondary market research, we've learned that the market is way too small. But ideally along the way, we'll identify a buyer with a burning need. And then we can look and say to ourselves, what's the risk in terms of this particular option? Are we missing other enabling technologies? Do we have a small market, et cetera? But often from those promising potential markets that remain, we do a little bit more desk research, which is that secondary market research. We do a little bit more customer discovery, digging into details, and then we can hone or figure out how we would want to launch into this market. Once our market opportunity is preliminarily chosen, we go on, and I'm not going to talk about this today, but we're heading towards estimating or evaluating the actual value of the opportunity, first at a high level and then later at a more granular level. And we always remain agile or flexible and open to pivoting based on future learning. With that, I've pretty much come to the conclusion of all the new material that I wanted to introduce to you today. I'll say a couple words about how we can help you get started, and then we would happily open this up to questions, because hopefully I've prompted a lot of questions in your mind today. Well, I've introduced a lot of new things today, and some of them may be quite foreign to you. So do feel free to reach out to our team. We are here to help you get started. Federal funding is available, but it's highly competitive. State programs such as the NJSBDC Tech Team exist in order to help you become more competitive as you propose your work for the federal government. The planning invested can reap rewards. Techniques for success can easily be learned. And believe me, I've been an entrepreneur before. I know that learning about your own business always pays off. So put a couple of resources here as far as how to reach general introductory information on SBIR, STTR, and then also there should be a link on some tutorials that you can use if you'd like, participating agency budget specifics, and then I believe that we'll be sending out a link where you can register to receive one-on-one consulting. With that, I'll open it up for questions. And I see we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A box already.
I would like to tell everyone to please submit all their questions in the Q&A box. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for your time. We appreciate all the valuable information. I was taking some notes myself. All right, so I would like to start with the first question. It's from Mr. Kabadi. Hi, Cherry. My startup is a technology platform that addresses the market pull with push for technology products. How can take advantage of the SBIR program? How can I take advantage of the SBIR program? I think that's what I meant to say.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for that question. So it sounds to me like, if I'm interpreting this correctly, and you can of course feel free if I'm not quite understanding your technology, just type in another question that gives me more detail here. But it sounds like you have some kind of a platform. I'm not sure what you mean by saying addresses market pull with push. Maybe you're trying to say that you resolve the conflict between market pull and technology push. I'm interpreting that, at least being a business person, I'm interpreting that as something where you have a business solution that you will sell perhaps to other businesses. I would say there are ways to take advantage of SBIR, STTR funding programs for that. I'm saying very generically without knowing the greater specifics. And I would encourage you to talk to one of us individually so that we better understand your technology. What I'm assuming is we would find something where you're solving a specific problem for an identified buyer, and we would match that to an agency mission. That's how we go about determining, which program you might be best eligible for. We'd go about matching that with an agency mission, and then coach you on how to apply for the funding. So that's a pretty generic answer, but I'm not sure I understood your question perfectly. Feel free to follow on either here or individually if you'd like to create an appointment with one of us to better understand what you're talking about.
Thank you for answering that question. Now the next one comes from Joey. It says, during the interview process, what would you recommend us to do if the interviewee would like us to know about our product?
Oh, well, if the customer is prompting that question, then I think it's perfectly fine to answer it. Keep in mind that and I guess I didn't say this specifically, I sort of inferred that you would have several interviews, right? I didn't say that outright. But if you have several interviews, I would be surprised, first of all, if every person would ask you that. It might be a rare question. Feel free to answer it. Really, what you're looking for is to better identify that person's problem. I would make a special note, by the way, if somebody wants to know about your product, they might get a little star by their name or something in my notes so that I know later on, oh, they expressed interest. I should go back and contact them at a future point. But normally we're talking about something that needs some technical development before it becomes a real product. So it'd be not so likely, I would say, that you might have an immediate solution for them in any case.
So we have also another question, how to deter, this is from Ruchi, it says, hi, how to determine our market and market size?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And some of the slides that I offered today talk a little bit about that, but let me say a few more words. I talked very generically today because among the audience, we might have people developing IT solutions, we might have people developing healthcare solutions, energy solutions, USDA agricultural solutions. I don't know who of you, I don't know among you what your backgrounds are. And so speaking very generally speaking, the technology that you have in mind, that you've invented or that you are inventing and trying to develop, it will have a proxy or a frame of reference in industry. It'll belong to a certain industry, like it might belong to biotechnology, or it might belong to information technology. If it's an information technology solution, it might be a blockchain solution. Again, I'm just giving several examples here, but you use that as a way to search for the secondary market research to try to find out what is the nature of that industry and what is the size of that market preliminarily. Once you see what the size is preliminarily, then you use that TAM, SAM, SOM approach to try to dial in and have a better understanding of the actual size of your market. There's lots and lots of stuff written about this online. I know I introduced many new terms today that might be unfamiliar to you, but that have existed for decades in the business realm. So if they're unfamiliar, you can probably do a little bit of Google searching, or of course, once you do that, and you try to estimate what you think your market size might be and your target market, that would be a wonderful time to connect with one of us who are expert in this and say, am I right? Here's what I'm thinking so far. Have I got this right? Or am I overlooking something? That would be a wonderful way to use our team.
Thank you, Sherry, for answering that. We have a multiple part question. Are you ready?
Yep.
It's coming from Samantha. It says, where do I begin when beginning to price a product? And then her product is a 3D printer. The next portion of that, it says, do you believe federal funding is available for technology such as this?
Hi, Samantha. Thank you for your question. So we didn't really cover pricing today. I could do, I don't know, at least an entire session on pricing, if not a full semester. Pricing can get very complicated. But when you're talking about emerging technologies, it's often not a bad idea to start with knowing the prices of what we would call comparable alternatives. So if there is something that's remotely like the technology that you propose, you can look to see what the price of that is. That's a starting point. That would be a way, we call that sort of top-down approach, because you're looking across markets from the top and looking down into those markets to see what those prices might be. Another way that you can price products is using a bottom-up approach, and that's by knowing all the costs of the various components and then adding on your margin, your profit, and so on and so forth. This is beyond sort of the topic that we've scratched the surface on today, but I'm trying to answer your question and give you a sense of how to proceed. That would be an easy way to have 2 data points, and then you can see, is the top-down method the same as the bottom-up method, or are they very disparately different? And do you need to do some additional adjustment when you think about your pricing? Also, if it's a very innovative product, it might command premium pricing, but that's a whole nother topic I don't want to get too deeply into in the time we have left today. Now, if the product is a 3D printer, well, there are 3D printers on the market today. That technology has been established for several years, and some of them are well-established, launch products, selling products, etc. But maybe there's something highly unique about yours. If there's something highly unique or innovative about yours, then yes, federal funding might be available to develop such a printer. Again, hard to answer in a kind of the type of session we have today with the audience, etc. So feel free to reach out for additional assistance, and we'd be happy to answer your question.
Thank you for answering that. So we have another question from Gary. One would expect SMO to be considerably large if you could partner with product opportunity with a big company already in the space. In that case, which SMO would you use in describing the opportunity in a grant application?
Hi, Gary. Excellent question. When I think of SOM, share of market, what I'm really eventually wanting to use that for is to show a reality check that an entrepreneur understands that they cannot, without partnering, they very likely cannot capture 100% of the market. Many times in a funding application or a proposal, really what you're doing is you're demonstrating that you know how to think about the problem. You may be a business person already who understands about partnering, and you may be able to argue that your SOM is bigger because you have skills in partnering and you intend on doing that. However, if you have a purely technical background, I think it would be misleading, and reviewers would tend to reject the notion of a very large SOM. SOM is more near term. It's not looking out several years after you've partnered. So the goal isn't to make the SOM huge, it's to make it realistic. And I think you demonstrate that you know how to think about that problem by being very realistic and not putting something in front of the reviewers that would make them discount your thinking or think that you were naive.
Okay, great. So we have we have 2 more questions here. Please, everyone, make sure that I know that some people are submitting their question in the chat box. Make sure you place your questions in the Q&A section so we're easier to find them and read them. And also be specific so Cheryl can better answer your question. We have a question from Pat. It says, how would you make it clear to the interviewee that there is no criticism of however they handle their problems, just pure interest in what the problems are?
That's a good question, Pat. Thank you for the question. I have to say, I'm thinking if I've ever encountered that before, and honestly, I would have to say I have not. Maybe it's just me being me in a genuine way. I've never had people feel like they were being judged. It sounds like maybe you've encountered that. So maybe think about what would I do if I wanted to just encourage open dialogue? I would say something like, I would not come across as an expert. I would say something like, I really genuinely want to learn about this space. There's no wrong answer. Maybe that's a good way to answer your question. If you feel like someone feels like they're going to be criticized.
Okay, great. The next questions come from Donald. He said, we have a very compelling early stage business for which we're trying to grow. In short, we return useful vision to those whose lives have been significantly impacted by the loss due to age-related muscular degeneration, AMD, and other forms of geographic retinal atrophy, GA. There is a substantial amount of IP, much patent we have developed to do this. Clinical studies, we were very successful, and our astonishingly simple procedure has been approved in Canada. Hundreds of patients have had their vision restored. Capital is needed to expand this gain approvals in other countries, including in the US. Is there something in New Jersey can do to assist?
Thank you, Donald. Excellent question. And I would say your firm is in a much more mature state than the ones that this presentation is aimed at. My guess would be, if you have already done clinical trials, you will be beyond the reach of the SBIR STTR program. You will be in the realm of very likely angel investors, venture capital, and or partnering with large companies in order to do, if there's more co-development needed, and or if there's maybe just an acquisition is the next step for you. Why don't you reach out to me directly? If you want to speak with me, you can put a note in your registration for NJSBDC that says, you'd like to talk with Cheryl, and I can query our team and see what the resources would be for that sort of what I would call later stage capital. That's probably where you would be from what I understand about your technology, and congratulations on maturing it to the state that you have so far.
Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, for all your valuable information. I will be sharing my screen now.
I see one more question there, Marjorie from Cesar. Do you want me to handle that one, or do you need a few minutes to wrap up?
Perfect, that's fine.
Yeah.
We have
I see just
2
one
minutes.
last one, maybe. We'll agree to take one more because you've been kind enough to type it in. It says, we're a metalworking small business dedicated to manufacturing customized CNC parts in a B2B market, new in the country and in the market. What would you recommend to reach the specific customers in Miami? Okay, I'm interpreting that you have a technology that's already working. Again, this one sounds a little bit like you've got this maybe more mature than the audience that would apply for federal funding. I haven't used customer discovery necessarily for manufacturing, but I think the other parts of the SBDC will have some thoughts for you about how to market your technology. So I would highly recommend that you connect with us. You may not end up speaking with someone at the tech team specifically, but I think you'll end up getting some good hints for marketing in a general way. So Marjorie, how do you feel about going over time? Because I see there's a couple more questions that have been...
Absolutely. That's totally fine. We can do the next 2 more questions.
Okay. All right. So then I see one that says early stage pilot program. What would I suggest in terms of working on right now, the business plan, etc.? Okay, Thomas, thank you for your question. This sounds like one in which you, when you say pilot, that makes me think you're talking about piloting a technology. Without knowing more, it's really hard for me to advise you on what you might be working on immediately or next. the way I look at it is it's always both advancing the technology and advancing the business simultaneously. Each of those things will have a certain timeline or flow. A lot of times technical development takes a while. So when I've been working directly in early stage firms before, what I've tended to do is use the downtime while the technology is maturing to work on the business. Hopefully that's a good answer for you.
And then we have the last question as of now. It says, if there is anything in the SBA/SBIR platform that allows entrepreneurs who are unable to allocate 100% of their time to their project.
Yes, absolutely. Because this is often very high risk, high return realm of innovation, many people do not, in fact, allocate 100% of their time initially. You may have seen on the eligibility slide about that the principal investigator at the time of an award has to devote at least 51% of their effort to the company. That doesn't even mean to that project, that means to the company. So definitely there are some things where you can be part-time, half-time, and trying to foster innovation while you still do something else if you're if you're committed in that direction. Very common.
Awesome. So we have a question from Jody. It says, greatly appreciate your patience, Shirley. Is the Department of Defense the most prominent potential customer? How would you recommend we get in contact with to interview them?
Excellent question. And this has changed just very recently. The Department of Defense used to be very, very difficult to kind of fathom. So many titles, so much jargon, so much bureaucracy. Nowadays, recently, within the last, I would say 18 months, so very, very recently, they have started new programs, which are almost, they might call them a phase one, but I would call them even a precursor to an ordinary DoD phase one, because they are literally about understanding the DoD as a potential customer. Usually those amounts of money are extremely small, maybe 25 grand, maybe 50 grand, something like that. The Air Force has a pilot program that they have stood up within the last 18 months that now is becoming a functional program. I was at the national conference in June and I heard the Navy is doing the same. There are other parts of the Department of Defense that are starting to adopt this type of approach. And they do show an understanding of how hard it is for outsiders to reach them. So I would encourage you to start, if you can identify a branch of the service, a branch of the military, see if they have one of these very early stage programs and use that as your way in. Outside of that, if they don't have that, it still might be very, very difficult. It's probably a much more advanced question. And why don't you reach out to one of us on the tech team? We'll see if we can assist you.
There we go. I would like to remind everyone, please submit your 3-minute survey. It's very quick. It's a great help for Sherry, and you will get all of the resources and a copy of her presentation. So thank you so much. Again, Sherry, if you have any questions, please remember we provide no cost consulting. Make sure you scan the QR code that you see on your computer right now, so we are able to pair you with a consultant who's going to help you grow and help your business thrive to the next level. We are here for you. Please note, we have next week and the next upcoming webinar is Accelerating Innovation with National Institutes of Health. This is part of the SBIR and STTR programs with Adam Sorkig. He's also a business policy manager and part of the NJSBDC consultant team. So make sure you scan your QR code here so you're able to register for next week. Thank you everyone who participated and to watch the entire presentation. Thank you for your time, Sherry. Please remember, this is NJSBDC Tech Team. We help innovators grow. We provide no-cost pitch to proposal consulting, training and events starting at zero cost, and exclusive small business tech resources funded by the SBA and partners. Remember, we are here for you. This is where business come to grow. Please point your camera to our QR code so you're able to register for all that we have. And if you have any questions, you can always submit it to us. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And see you at the next seminar. Thank you so much. Have a great day.